And I will do this so I don't see myself, because I find that distracting. Right. So this is the high-level vision for. So this is the high-level vision presentation for Tides of Revival, where I will try to explain my vision for the game and what it is and how you play it a little bit, and just all kinds of details. It is quite high level, but I do try to be concrete in a few cases to sort of make it so that you get a good feeling of what it actually is, and not get too sort of highbrow about it. I hope it's a good mix of those. I will be saying a few things multiple times, I think, because it's sort of a complicated game, and it's going to be complicated to make it, and it's complicated to describe it. So I'll try to like approach it from multiple angles, and in that way, hopefully you will get a good sort of picture of what it is I'm trying to say. That is my hope. Let's see if it works out. So yeah, Tides of Revival is what I call an open world immersive sim for PC. And I should also say that it's meant to be single player. If we add multiplayer, like a co-op thing at some point in the future, it's not a priority for me, and I kind of hope we don't do it, but maybe a lot of people will want to do it, and maybe will not play it, and maybe someone will join the team who really wants to add multiplayer or something, and then we can think about it. But primarily it's going to be single player. And the sort of simplest way that I found to explain it is that it's Daggerfall, but Daggerfall came out in 1996, I think. So we have about 30 years of, things we've learned as an industry on how to make games, and all sorts of like procedural, algorithms and ways to make content, PBR, all kinds of things. ECSs, all kinds of things. So that's sort of the core of the game. So it's a massive simulated procedurally generated fantasy realm where it takes place in that. And it's been baked for days with a focus on detail, logic, and relations. And baked for days, that means that we as developers create the world in a procedurally generated step. And then that bakes or produces a game that players can then download and play, kind of like as if they were downloading Skyrim or something, as opposed to like downloading, say, Minecraft, and then every time you play, the player themselves generate a map. So yeah, we create the map, the world for them. Build your character the way you want, go where you want, choose your own approach and style of play. So freedom is a really big part of the game. You should be able to really feel like you, like from a role-playing perspective, it's not like, okay, this quest requires me to solve it in this specific way, or in these 2 or 3 specific ways. I really feel like the world is just telling me, these are your options based on the characters in it and the houses or worlds or the levels. It's based on what's in the world rather than what someone has dictated for you on how to do things. Your choices and actions matter. Roads will be built, bandits will reform, and sworn enemies will open trade routes. Yeah, so this is another big thing of the game, where the world isn't static from like the baked world, so to speak. It's not static. As you play the game, it'll change, and it'll change with your actions and without your actions. And hopefully your actions are strong enough to sort of bring a positive change to the world. And with this, I really hope that Tide will break the mold of what RPGs can be. I think it does. I think it can. We'll see. All right. So let's just take an overview of the game. Like, what is this game about, really, if you know nothing about it? So it's first person. So stealth, combat, magic, movement, interaction, physics. You can, like in Deus Ex, you can pick up a crate, stack it on another crate, and jump on top of the crate. And then look maybe around a corner to see where you can go. These types of things. I think you'll be able to switch to third person if you want to in certain cases, or maybe always, but I think for the most case people will be playing in first person. Part of that is for the personally I think that it gives a stronger immersive touch as well, which is also an important thing, which you will see later. There will be dialogue in the game, and the dialogue will be generated in real time. So when you go up and talk to a character, what they say and what you can say back will be, it'll be based on both you and the character and things that ever happened around it. So you might, they might say something like, "Hi, isn't the weather nice today?" Right? That's the simplest way, simplest thing that could happen. But it'll be, it won't be fixed scripts that they say, but and this is something that I actually haven't decided yet. Something that we'll have to decide in the future. It could be either like a proper like a procedural rules-based system where we look up dialogue options and swap out words and that sort of thing, or we could do it like LLM based, but that has some good things about it and other not so good things about it, so that's really not something that I've decided yet. One thing that I would want is for voices, voiceovers to be available, and that is also something that will, it basically depends on if there is tech and data available for that in the future, and that is not a given. So we'll see what happens there. Quests, they will not be like, someone has written a quest from A to B, to C, and with all of the dialogue in between, and story arcs, and personal growth and all of that. That might happen anyway, but it's not going to be because someone sat down and wrote all of these parts. It's going to be more freeform, and based on the events around what's happened. So if you come to a village and it's like 5 years into the game, it'll be based on what's going on with that village at that point in time. The world. So this is like the basically all that I'm describing is the sort of my end game vision of this game, where it's like at its ultimate, right? And it's not necessarily the case that it will be this way up until all the way until that time, because that could take like 2 decades or however long. But in my head, I want the world to be around 500 by 500 kilometers, and I have about 100,000 NPCs that have some sort of representation in the game, and you can kill an NPC and then they won't show up again, and they will have like relations to other NPCs and so on. So they are like actual people that we have baked ahead of time to some degree. There will be travel mechanics that are what people usually call fast travel. We will have in the game, but it won't be just go from town A to town B and boom, you're there, and now you're on your way. The actual travel itself will be an important part of the gameplay. There's a lot of simulation going on, so we bake the world, but then if you were to just sit and do nothing for 10 in-game years, a lot would happen with the world. Even if you don't do anything. But of course, this also means that you can affect it, and your changes will have you know, hopefully like have an effect on the world outside of what the specific thing that you just did. So a typical example that I like to give is like you maybe take out some goblins in a forest and the village is happy, but then, you know, something worse moves into the forest because there's now nothing to, you know, keep the forest bad anymore. So time, as I've alluded to, the game will, you know, take place over decades. Like this is also a little bit uncertain, but I think this is a reasonable estimate that, you know, your character will maybe start as, say, 20 years old, and like if you play the game to the end, if there even is a proper end, then that could take like 20 or 40 years for this character, right? And that also means that things like travel takes time, proper time, change in the world takes time, all manner of things take time. Like if you if you break a leg in the game, you might have to like go to a hospice or hospital and lie there for like 3 weeks to heal up, you know, and that's fine, because that, you know, provides all of these sort of details that sort of make the world more believable, means that we can add a lot of gameplay that I don't think other games have really done. So I'm really looking forward to that. So visual target is hard to describe, but I would say, you know, roughly quality-wise, Skyrim. You know, some things I think we can do better, like shading and PBR. I don't think that was a thing for Skyrim, but other things will be worse, surely. It's the same with dialogue, right? It's not. We're not going to have like hand-written prose coming from the heart of a writer, right? It's not. So in that sense, some of the writing, some of the dialogue will be worse, but other things will be better and cooler. So, you know, I think that's a interesting trade-off. And right now it feels like all games are, you know, handwritten, blah blah blah. And this is another game, another way to do it that isn't really that well explored, I think. Okay, so this slide is a little bit more. It's kind of like a poster for the game, like to make someone sucked in, right? So let's do it. Venture out into the dawning of a world, splintered and forgotten after centuries of terror and collapse. Slay monsters and bandits to make travel safe. Facilitate trade between goblins and dwarves. Talk to NPCs that react naturally to recent events. Help villages expand and flourish. Grow a following and build a faction of your own. This is something that I haven't really maybe talked to the team about, but this really comes down to having a money sink in the game that makes sense, because usually what will happen in any sort of RPG like this is they always have this need to like nerf looting and come up with weird ways to spend money. Like you kill a bandit and you saw that they had a sword, but when you go to loot the bandit, they don't have a sword, because you can't just dole out hundreds of swords to the player, because then they would just get rich immediately, right? And that's like taking the balance before what makes sense, right? So one of my approaches to this game is like, okay, first we do what makes sense in the world, and then we think about, okay, how do we balance this? And one way to balance this is, okay, you've amassed like a horde of you know, gear, and maybe you can, or you've sold all of it and you have a lot of money. Like, what can you now do with it? Well, you're on this quest to like better society, right? To build up the world. You know, shouldn't you be able to like scrounge up people and do something with it, right? It's not the only way to have like a money sink like this, but I think it could be very, very cool. Push back evil and restore civilization. Are you ready to bring in the tide of revival? All right. I think that sounds pretty good. Okay, so this is where we get to the first of a few slices of play, which is things that I've sprinkled throughout the presentation. And it's basically me trying to describe something that could happen in the game in a semi-concrete fashion. So you can get an idea of what you're actually doing in the game and how you're playing it and what might happen. So you offered gold to the leader of a vile goblin tribe so that they'd move up the mountains. Nearby villages are now safer, enough to send out caravans and protect the roads. So this shows that, you know, there are multiple ways to solve, you know, quests or problems in the game, right? You don't have to like just go to the goblin tribe and just murder everyone. You can solve it in a different way. And this also, I think I'll get back to this later, but it sort of speaks to this thing of not having just like evil races or evil, you know, factions or settlements in the game. Like maybe we will have them, but you know, you could imagine that a goblin tribe, they're just trying to live, right? They have their own, you know, thing going on, and if you just murder everyone, maybe that's not a super nice thing to do, right? Even though that's what you do in every other RPG, right? So this is where we get to the overview of the presentation. So these are the things that I will be going through. I think the largest one is the genre deep dive. So brace yourselves for that one. But yeah, let's do it. Pillars. So the first pillar that I think may be the most important one. No, I think they're all probably equally important. So this is basically making sure that the player, when they're playing the game, stays mentally inside the game. They're not like thrown out because they're like, wait, how does that make sense? Oh, well, I guess that's just how games work. You know, I want to avoid that type of thinking. So there's a focus on what I call believability, which you might also call like realism, which is basically just, you know, being able to, you know, as a player, say that I believe what's going on in the game. I don't have to, you know, suspend my disbelief too much. It just makes sense what's happening in the game. It's things like I can come up with a plan and be reasonably sure that it's possible to execute it based on what I know is reasonable. I don't have to know the rules of the game specifically to think that I can come up with this plan. I just need to know that, okay, I can probably do it, and then have it work out roughly as you might think, without having to be like, oh, actually, games work like this game has this specific thing where it works like this, so that didn't work at all. You know, concreteness is another thing where things in the game should be actual things, not just you know, game objects that do some, you know, that only do the thing that they look like they're doing. Basically, I'll get back to this. Intuitiveness, yeah, that's what I was getting at. You should be able to intuit how things work in a game without actually like knowing how the game mechanics work. And beauty is another, like, it's a core thing for the immersion, right? That you can live yourself into the world because it just looks really nice. Freedom is another pillar where you are free to do things how you want, and that goes like from anything like, okay, I want to go east or west, or I want to, you know, sneak into this vent. Vent. We probably won't have vents, right? But you know, in Deus Ex, you have like you always have like multiple things to get to a specific place, or you know, to solve a specific problem. So that's something that's super important. Character growth, like you know, you should be able to build your character in any way you want, and that basically means that we will have a classless system. I am not super fan of classes in RPGs, so this basically means that you will be able to do, you know, I don't know. I have an example later, like an archer that can do a bit of magic as well. Personal goals, I think, is something that we should really try to have the player be able to, you know, they should be able to think for themselves, this is what I want to do now, and that like after I'm done with that, I'm going to do this. So have like multiple goals that they are going towards, and I think that's especially important because we're not doing quests in kind of the same way that other games are doing it. So it's really important that we are making it possible for the player to choose their own goals. And change is the third pillar. Like I want it to be so that you can like make a village feel safe, and then you can come back to that village. Maybe the village is like torn, everything is really bad, but then you come back to the village like half a year later and everyone is more happy. They've started to build a road, they have like a goat farm or something, and you can be like, oh, I made this happen for them. That feels really good, right? Large scale is about, it's not just that you complete the quest, and after the quest, one of the characters in the quest have like a, they now have a painting on their wall or something, or you got a trinket. It's more along the lines of like, okay, now they're actually be able to build roads or build improvements to their village, or that sort of thing. Like big things should happen. It should be based on rules and simulations, and it should be understandable, and that's important from a game perspective. It's important to us, or to me, that we're not making like a tech demo. We're not making this just to write a really cool world simulation, right? The purpose at its core is to make a game that's fun to play, and for that, I think we need to have understandability as a goal as developers, so that the player can understand what made this change happen, and how did it change, so that they can learn, and also understand that oh, it changed because I did this thing, and then that thing happened, and that's what's caused the thing to change. Right, another slice of play. When planning your fast travel route to the next town, you decide to trek across unexplored lands. You opt to travel carefully and with a focus on exploration. This, together with your high wilderness skill, should maximize the chances of finding an interesting location while also keeping you relatively safe. So this is coming back to fast travel being like a core feature of the game, where when you travel across the map, you get to set parameters like I want to plan my route so that it goes past safe havens like taverns or inns, where I want to travel across the nature, but I while doing that, I might set like a side task to forage berries or something like that, right? So that that might make it take longer, but at the end of the travel, at the end of the journey, you will have berries, right? Or you could do like you could have scouting as a side mission or side task, and that could make it possible for you to scout to see like fireplaces in weird places, like, oh, could that be like a bandit's nest, that sort of thing. Okay, let's talk about gameplay loops. So this first slide that's coming is probably like it's pretty big. It's gonna maybe be a bit overwhelming, but I'll try to go through it. So at the middle, actually first, let me just say that I think gameplay loops is a useful tool to like think about the world, think about the game, and to think about the design of the game. But I think it can, like, I don't like to, like, for this game, I don't think we should follow, the game design methodology of, implementing loops and thinking about loops as like the most important thing of the game, right? It's more about, because that can really make the game feel like, like it's gamey, like you're just making the rounds and you're not just in this world doing what you think makes sense. You're just, following, you're on the treadmill basically. So I think we need to be aware of that, but it is a useful tool, I think. So these are at least 3 of the loops, and I think the core one is the revival loop, and that is basically that you're at a location that's at risk of something. It could be like an attack, or it could be like a corrupt mayor or something. Sorry, let me. Okay, and when you're at a location that has some sort of problem, you need to first figure out what the problem is, and then you need to fix the problem, and then you go on to the next location. That's the loop, and in this loop we have 2 exits. One is, oh, you find the problem, it's a dragon, right? And you're like, oh, well, I'm just level 5 or whatever, I can't handle a dragon. So then we go to the progression loop where you're like, oh, well, I want to be stronger or faster or, better. So what do? Well, we find some sort of quest or location that's fitting to us. We solve that thing. We get, XP or gold or whatever it might be. And then, we can just, like, if that's all we're interested in, we can just do this, or we can go back at some point to the revival loop and continue solving this, right? Okay, so another thing that might happen is, okay, you've done the thing, you want to find a new location. Well, this is where you get to the travel loop, and I would say you start here, which is you listen around for rumors, or maybe you've already heard something, or maybe you have seen something on the map or like on the horizon or something that looks cool. So you figure out how to get there. You do get there by travel, camping, exploration. I'll get into this more later. And you fix whatever's there, right? And then you go back to finding somewhere new to go, and you do this, right? And this is basically like back to the it's the same thing here. Maybe you come somewhere and you realize that it's too hard of a thing for you to do, so you go to the progression loop, and then there's links back and forth here. Okay, so this is one way to look at it, and let's see, here is another one, which is more like, I think if we just look at the game as having one big loop, what would that look like? Okay, so you've heard some sort of rumors, or you've set yourself goals of some kind. Based on that, you figure out where to go. When you do that, you do this sort of traveling thing, right? Where you travel there, and maybe you like get sidetracked because you're exploring, find something interesting on the way. You might stumble onto, bandits on the way, or cool, things that no one knew of. It's going to be a map where most of it is forgotten. Like a lot of people don't really know what's out there, so there's going to be plenty of things for you to find on the way to different places. On the way, because most travels are probably going to take days. I think that's reasonable, which means that you will probably have to camp at places, or this could also be like getting to an inn, staying at an inn. And this is just an idea, but I think it could be pretty cool, and that is that these sort of places is where you actually do your level up. And I have this very vague idea of what I call introspection, which is where you choose sort of where you want your character to go. So maybe you say like, well, as you play the game, you might be like, oh, actually I want to go I want to become more of a ranger. So by setting that as sort of like an introspection goal, that you're sitting around the campfire and your character thinks, about what they're doing, and as part of this, they're doing this introspection thing, which is basically something like they're marking, like it could be like they're marking three skills that they would like to improve, and those skills will now, acquire XP at twice the rate or something. I don't know. We'll see. But I think this could be a way to make camping quite cozy and like a real fun game mechanic. You'll be traveling and you'll make camp, and we can have like a camera that like moves around it while you're doing these sort of level up mechanics. I think it can be kind of cute. Okay, so you get to the place where you investigate what's going on, and you decide what to do, and this I will describe later. And then you figure out which items you want. Maybe you want to hire people to help you. All sorts of planning basically on how to solve the problem that you've found, right? And you do the thing and you get a reward. And so the actions that I'm talking about here are some examples of that, right? So maybe it's just like, you go and murder everyone, right? That's the classic one. Or you negotiate something. It's actually like a quest. Like, I think while we won't have like handwritten quests from A to B to C, we might have like quest templates or quest frameworks where we can hook certain things up, right? And that could be a way for us to get a little bit more of a feel of handwritten content, right? Maybe you can help a village train their militia. You can teach them or inspire them, whatever it might be. And this will, basically mean that the location improves or is safer, whatever. And, then you're good to move on to the next one. Okay. Another slice of play. You cast Fly to reach the battlements on a remote tower in the dead of night. You use Assassinate, Stealth, and Bow to sneak down and kill the sleeping wizard. So the sleeping wizard was not expecting an attack from above, right? 2 months later, you meet a small group of retired road wardens, capable but worn. You tip them off about the tower. They agree to hold it and to keep the area safe. So I mentioned the time it takes here, like 2 months. That's to really indicate that, in this game, nothing happens instantly, right? It can take a long time, and like once you do this, it might take them another 2 months to like scrounge up gear and additional men and women to like do this thing, right? Or maybe they'll go and tell a group of settlers that, we're going to protect this tower now, so it's safe for you to move in. So when you come here in a year, you'll see a new village, right? Wouldn't that be pretty cool? Yes, it would. That would be pretty cool. All right, let's talk about the... I'm sort of reading the team's chat in the background, but I'm trying to not concentrate on it because I want to move ahead. All right, so the world of tides is procedurally generated, but unlike games like Minecraft or Dwarf Fortress, it is not done at the start of every game. This is what I mentioned earlier. It is generated once by the developers using a large stack of algorithms, a handcrafted rule set, a rich content database, and a detailed simulation. I think this is important to state that, just because it's like procedurally generated, it doesn't mean that we just, we just throw everything out there and like whatever it generates, that's perfectly fine. We are gonna like sit and have our little hands all over this to make sure that it actually produces something interesting. One thing that a lot of games do when they talk about their procedural generation, it's like, well, we have 500 billion combinations of swords, and like that is not the interesting part of procedural generation to me. I mean, it's a sort of maybe a nice side effect, maybe, but that's not, you know, the thing that makes me hyped about it. So what does this gives you for the player? It ensures logical consistency. You know, things like, well, if you have a mayor in a town, you might expect them to have, you know, certain connections to other mayors in other towns. Maybe there's like a council across towns, all sort of things. Or maybe they have a family, and, you know, their kids have friends, and their friends, you know, all of this type of things, where it feels like the connections that should be there are there. Usually, I would say in RPGs, it's often the case that you will find this sort of you know, here are two characters that have a connection, right? It's like the father and the daughter, and there's a quest that involves those two, but it only involves those two, and it seems from what you can tell that there's no one else that they, you know about or have any connections to, and no one else will be affected by the quest that you are doing, right? So I want to get away from that. I want to have, like, you know, deep connectivity on many different layers, and plenty of hooks to set up dynamic quests. Yeah, so, you know, placing tags or different forms of, like, you know, places where we can be like, okay, this type of quest or event should hook into this type of data, and then when you get to a location that has that type of data, then you're going to be able to possibly see that event, you know, happening. Yes. Okay. So the world scales. Yeah, we'll have long travel distances. We'll have biomes. I think, like, so 500 by 500 kilometers. I think that's roughly the size of Great Britain, and, you know, Great Britain is big, but it's like, that's like, you know, it's not that super diverse, you know, because, I mean, it's based on Earth, right? But so and some of, like, you know, the mountains of Scotland are, like, huge, right? So I think what we'll do is we'll have biomes, but they will be smaller than you would expect them to actually be, right? Not like, you know, not Skyrim small or like super condensed, but, you know, they will be, you know, they'll have to be a little bit smaller in order for us to have a lot of them and for them to be varied and that sort of thing. I think that's just one of the trade-offs that we'll have to do. To get around, you'll be able to get mounts of different kinds, ships, and maybe towards, like, the end of the game, you'll unlock portals, so you can actually travel, you know, from big cities to another big city in like no time. But maybe that will have its own costs of some kind. When we have these sort of long distances, it means that you do actually have to plan for things, which I think will be quite interesting. Like, will you bring a carriage? Probably you can't bring a carriage if you're, like, traveling across the mountain, right? If you're doing the direct route without roads, right? Then you might have to skip your carriage and, you know, put your money in a bank or something. So I think a lot of that will be things that people like that we haven't, like, we'll be able to do things that other games really haven't been able to do, because they don't really treat time as a part of the game. All right. High fantasy, I think that's a good, you know, this is more like personal taste, I guess, but I think we can do a lot of fun with just, like, you know, we'll have magic and there will be different races. I mean, I know that races is a complicated subject in the world of RPGs, you know, right now, but, you know, I think everyone understands what I mean. I'm not sure what a better word is for it. So primarily I'm thinking, like, classic, you know, and this is partly because I don't have a great imagination about these things. So if someone wanted to join us that have a, you know, strong imagination, I think that could be really cool. But I'm thinking fairly standard-ish Euro medieval style, you know, thatched houses and you know, farmers and, you know, that sort of thing, feudalism or whatever things are called, right? I want to avoid good versus evil to a large degree. You know, not have like, okay, goblins are evil, and if you see a goblin, you just need to kill it, or even like bandits are 100% evil. You know, there should be ways to like approach a bandit and talk them out of what they're doing, because probably what they're doing the thing not because they're like inherently bad people. They're just maybe down on their luck, or you know, it's a really bad world at the start, right? So you know, not true dark edgy is also like a personal preference, but you know, I think I mean, I'm like a European, so I'm not like bothered by things like nudity and things like that. It's like, to me, it would be fine if you were to like, you know, you go down to the lake that's near a village and people are bathing nude or something. To me, that would be fine. I think that, you know, is something that we could do, and I don't think that would be a problem really. I'm not saying we like it's not like super important, but it is important that we don't like that we are prude just to you know, make it nicer for a specific market or something, right? Dark and edgy is also like, I think there can be cases where we might want that, but I'm personally not like I can like super dark, you know, films or series or whatever, but I can also feel like sometimes they are just dark because it's cool to be dark, or it's edgy to be dark, like you know, and it needs to feel earned, I think, if we do that kind of thing. I think in general, I would like a feeling of the game should be like, it should feel mostly positive, and I don't want like, there are like certain things that I don't want in the game, even though they might technically, you know, make sense to exist. You know, things like, you know, anything like sexual assault, that sort of thing, you know, there's no point, I think, in having that in the game, even though it might technically make sense or make the world more believable or whatever. We can just skip it and, you know, it'll be fine. Even if it's fantasy and magic and all of that, it's important that we still try to keep it believable, so that everything still sort of makes sense within that, you know, within that premise. It should things should still make sense. Okay. Inhabitants. So I would like our intelligent races, whether that be like humans, goblins, or if it's like we thought of centipedes, you know, walking centipedes or something. Whatever we have, I think it would be more interesting if they were intermingling a lot. Like if you find a village, you'll quite often find many different races just hanging out and doing stuff. And I don't really want racism to be like a trope the way it usually is in a lot of RPGs, where like, oh, dwarves hate goblins or elves, and you know, I don't know, it just it's too negative of a theme for me. The same with sexism. Is like, you know, it's too old and everyone knows it, and it's just there's nothing positive about it really. I think we can have it in certain instances, like, you know, a certain character can, you know, hate another village because they did something dumb, right? But not as like a core feature of the world building. I would like to avoid it. Intelligent beasts. I think this goes with the magic setting. It's not just wolves have come into the forest. It's the wolf mother is there, who is like a twice the size of a normal wolf, and they can actually speak, and they have goals, and you can talk to them, but they you can give them something that they want, and then they'll do something else, right? Or you can have a brood mother who accepts, you can tell her about, if you go 5 kilometers in that direction, you'll find a nice goblin camp, and they'll be like, okay, I'll do that. And then I think the last thing here is a little bit I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but I want it, and that is children in the game. And it is problematic because if there's children, like, can you just killed like a whole bunch of killed kids? People might have objections to that, but I think this is one of those cases where it makes enough sense to have it in the game, and it would be very, very strange not to have them in the game, that I think we just have to have them in the game. And one strong reason for it is because of the long playing time. Like, it should be the case that if you come into a village and there's like a 5-year-old kid running around, and you're just at the start of the game, so you introduce yourself and maybe you give your sword to the kid, right? And then 20 years later you come back and they're now a guard of the leader of the guards, and they remember you and they have your sword, because they're now they've been so inspired about your trips or whatever, and it would, like, if we didn't have kids, then what would we just spawn in new people at the age of 18 into villages at random points? We could do it, but I would like to have kids, even though it's problematic in some senses. I would probably be fine with, if people really wanted to, I would be fine with kids can't get hurt until they're 18 or 15 or something. But yeah, that also has that's gonna have super weird consequences. So yeah, we'll see. Right, another slice of play. A group of bandits have claimed the ruins as their base. You take out 2 guards silently, but their absence quickly raises suspicions, and soon after, an alarm. Armed, they move out in groups and spot your boat. You now have no quick means of escape. It's just you and 15 smart, angry men and women. So the point that I want to make here is that the AIs are, like the agents or the people in the game, are actually smart, and they don't follow a set routine on how to handle certain things. I don't know. It feels like, I don't know for how long, but it's basically always been the case, like going back 20 years or something, that you kill a guard and then another guard comes in there like, I thought I heard something. It must have been the wind. And then they go back and do whatever they were doing before, right? And I think that's that's a fine. It works for some games, and it worked for a long time. But now it feels like everyone knows this mechanic, and it's become a really weird trope rather than something that you, as a player, find acceptable, I think. So, I mean, I will say that it can be fun in some ways. Like, I was playing Horizon Zero Dawn, and I came up to a bandit camp, like a huge bandit camp, and they had at least 30 people in there, I think. And I shot one of them outside. And then one of the other ones noticed that, and they were like, I think I heard something, and they ran to investigate, and then I shot that one, and then they just came like one by one, and I had like a lot of fun, like just shooting each one in turn. But of course, that would like that sort of thing would like it wouldn't happen in real life, right? At some point, they would be like, "Hey, how's it going over there?" Right? People sometimes say that game AIs or game agents, they shouldn't be smart because players don't want smart enemies. They just want like enemies that play good or something like that. And I disagree. I don't want. Well, it's fine for some games. It's not what I want for Tides. Okay, so now let's do a kind of reality check, is what I call it, and you might call this like a I don't know. It's more about the production of the game than the design of the game. So, can we even make this? Is a good question that I think sensible people would ask, and I think the answer is yes, because Daggerfall did not exactly what we're doing, but it's something quite similar to what we did 30 years ago. I'm not sure how many they were, probably 10 or 15 maybe, right, people, and I think if they did it 30 years ago, we can do it now, right? We should have much better tools. We should have much better knowledge about algorithms and all kinds of things, that it should be it should be doable, right? So like I said, this vision is about like a perfect game in my mind that's like 20 years into the future, right? And if that was it, then I might say that no, because who knows, who can say that a game like this is possible on that time scale. But what I want to do is we release a baked game every year, or I think like at the start, like now, maybe once every 6 months, then maybe once per year, and then after a couple of years, we start doing it every 2 years or something. And that basically means that if we were to stop after 10 years, we will still have a nice game out by then, and it won't be like the perfect vision game, but that's fine. If we make the game in 10 years, that's like a third of what I'm trying to get to here. That's still gonna be a real cool game, right? And if we make that, that's totally a success. And yes, because I think when people hear about the scale of the game and what I want to do with it, they're like, well, you're gonna need like 500 people to do this, and I understand that, but I also have, part of why we're doing everything procedural is because that will, in theory, reduce a lot of manpower and man hours needed to make the game. Like, let's say that we came up with a simple procedure to generate a door or something, a door model, then we could run that with 10 different parameters to get 10 different door models that we could place in the game. So I think once we start having a bunch of rules for creating stuff, then things are going to quite quickly sort of snowball is probably the wrong word, but like we're gonna get a whole lot of content for very little effort, I think. All right, what are our strengths? So one is that I think we have a really solid core team, and that might be a little bit, I'm pretty good. But what I mean is like, so I worked in games for like 17 years ish, and I know, a little bit of everything from like, writing some sort of vision document or game design stuff to gameplay, programming, optimization, engine stuff. I have kind of a broad background coming into this. I know a bit about like production and team leading as well. I would say that I'm like, there are probably better people than me on everything that I do, but I think I have a good base of everything that we will need. It's like, except for things like, art production or that kind of thing. So I'm not much of an artist. Right. I think between, and I should also mention that, sorry, I'm too fast. Like, I couldn't really ask for a better 4-man team to start with. Like having a technical artist that can do like rendering stuff like Giuseppe is super useful. An artist that can but that can provide art is extremely useful. And Alexander with his deep knowledge about all kinds of things, and also things like he's really good at math and all sort of things that is very all of this makes for like what I really want in a team to make this. So I hope it'll grow soon with more people. Right. So one thing that I think we're doing right is that we have the right level of tech ownership and pride, and what that basically means that we're not using Unity or Unreal or Godot, or like a fixed engine like that. And the problem, because the problem with that would be that we can't change the base, the core of the engine, right? So if there's something that's limiting us at that point, we're basically screwed. And I think I think like both Unity and Unreal are good engines in their right, but I don't think they would be good engines for us. But it's also the case that, okay, we are writing everything ourselves from scratch, but we aren't like afraid or we don't have this need to write everything ourselves. It's like, this is something that I've talked to Giuseppe about a bit, but like, if there's something that allows us to take a shortcut or that solves a problem that we have so that we don't have to write it ourselves, that's just good. The time frame that we're on, like let's say it's 20 years, that means that, to me, part of that means that we have time to learn from the things that we've used, and if we want to like switch them out, then we'll have time to be able to do that, basically. And like, this is a whole talk in my head on this, but yeah, it's I think we are on the right track here. And regarding pride, it's also like, when I started, I wrote a super bad hacky system for train rendering and train physics, and it did all manner of things. And to me, that was totally fine, because I knew that I wanted to rewrite it to something better, and that we have now done, and we do have a much better system for that is more general and more efficient and all sorts of things. And while that isn't perfect, it's a better base to build from, and I think that's a really good style for me. Like, that's a good approach to developing games. It's totally fine to make something super hacked, because then you can learn from that. And you can do other things that depend on that, and then at some point in the future you can just swap that out to something better, and that's okay. It's okay to write shitty code, basically. It has its costs, but it's worth it. Another strength is that we are doing procedural content, because it allows us to do a lot of stuff. Like, we can make a lot of, we can make 5 billion swords if we want to. But it also means that we can do things on another scale, like that when you're handcrafting a world, you can't really do. Like, if you have this father and daughter, it's not really feasible to, like, you have this village of like 100 people. Like, it would take like 10 designers to go through all of these people and figure out who's connected to who and who likes who and who visits who on Saturday dinners and all that sort of thing, right? But we can do that because it's just like a CPU work, right? So there's a lot of interesting things we can do there that it's just because we do it procedurally. Sorry, I read comments. Right. Okay, so what is our weakness, or what are our weaknesses? Well, one is that, it's just a hobby project, right? Or a side project. We're doing this at the pace that we can, and that's totally fine. But it means that, it'll take time for us to do this. We'll need a lot of art. Well, not just art, but we'll need a lot of content, right? And that's a bit scary, but I think at some point we might realize that we'll do important things handmade, like in art. We'll craft like the centerpiece of a village or something. Those types of things we make as art, but door handles we procedurally generate so that they look nice and varied in different biomes and different villages and all of that sort of thing, right? So I think, there will be there'll be a lot of art. Okay. And procedural content is also like weakness, right? Because I think a lot of people who start on RPG, they will expect, quest lines with personal journeys and arcs and well-written prose and twists and all kinds of things, right? And we will be able to have that to some degree, but not in the same way, right? We will be different. And to a lot of people, that might be worse. I think that's fine, right? So, we are making this game open source and free. So, to me, it doesn't really matter if we don't, if the mass market is like, no, this game is not for us, right? Because I think even if the mass market of people don't find the game appealing, then I think there's still a lot of people that would, because I think I believe so much in the vision that I think there'll be a lot of people who will see this game and be like, wow, I didn't know this type of game, like that you could make games like this. That sounds extremely audacious or something, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, you gotta live comes. Okay. So here's another thing that people usually do when they talk about games and viability, and that is to look at competitors. So let's just do that quickly. So Daggerfall is maybe the biggest one in some sense, because it's very close. It's more of a dungeon crawler maybe than like an immersive sim. But there's a lot of similarities with Daggerfall, but it's 30 years old, and even with modded, there's a Unity version now that you can play, and there's mods, which is super cool. But even modded, like it's you can tell that it's 30 years old, and it's going to require a lot of work to make it not Yankee, right? So Skyrim, it's like, I don't know, 12 years old or something, and it still sells a lot. So I think that's just good, right? That means that people want RPGs, fantasy RPGs. And I think at this point it's like, can there be a new one, maybe? Right? So I think that this is sort of in our favor. And the next Elder Scrolls will be a competitor, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, I'm not really upset about that. Same thing about Wayward Realms. Is probably like, from what I know about that game, I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of similarities, I think, between us and them, and I think that's totally fine. and I'm really looking forward to it because to me, I feel like no one has really made this type of game since Daggerfall, and there is certainly enough like design space for 2 games in this genre, right? So there's just so much you can do with the premise. There's like games like Caves of Cod or Soul Ash and a bunch of other sort of open worldy top-down games, and they're great. I like them, but I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, that's nice, but it's not really for me because I really want the sort of first-person experience, right? Or like me, you like this, but you would also like this, right? No Man's Sky is another very sort of similar game in some sense, but it's just like they suffer from the fact that they generate planets, right? So they and a universe, right? So they can do that thing that we do, where we bake everything, and we get this this network of connectivity between things. Like we know that like, the mayor of this city has been to this city, and they have their cousin lives there, and that can be something that we can use for a quest or whatever. They can't really do that, right? Yeah, we have a rich world, as Alexander says here in the chat, and they can patch it up to some degree after the fact, like after their generation, but I don't think it's not the same thing really. Outward is sort of a survival RPG that is in some ways quite similar, but it's also quite small. So like it's not like a massive game in that sense. So again, not a huge competitor, even though I think people who like Outward will probably like our game and vice versa. There might be more. You could argue that Horizon is a competitor, but I think to me, games like Horizon and Far Cry and Witcher, they are different compared to things like Skyrim and Tides. It's not quite the same thing. It's a slightly different genre, I think. Okay, so who even wants this game? So this is what I came up with, and I think like anyone who wants an RPG where they are primarily part of a world that feels real and where they have an actual noticeable effect on it. And if we compare to many other RPGs, almost all of them, AAA at least, it's more about you're following a story, and there's a bunch of mini stories that you face along the way, like side quests. But the mini stories, they don't really affect anything. They're just like their own contained thing, and you play it mostly. I don't want to tell people why they play games, but it is mostly about like you play Fallout for the quest, the main quest, and the world is more of like a backdrop, right? And I love Fallout, so it's not like bad, but it's a different thing, right? So there are probably other ways to phrase this, but that's what I came up with like earlier today. Okay, and hold on to your hats, people, because I have an animation for you, okay? So this is what you basically get if you search for open world or fast travel on YouTube. Okay, so basically there's a lot of like this sentiment, I would say, when it comes to like open world games and fast travel and that sort of thing on YouTube, is that there's a lot of problems with it, and like of course it's a little bit because people post these sort of controversial hot takes to get views, right? And I mean, these get a lot of views. It's like 700k, 3 million views on like I Hate Fast Travel, a 7-minute video, right? So I think this is probably something that resonates with people. I think that, you know, open world games, you know, I really like them, but why are they, you know, weird? Or why do I feel like they don't live up to the potential, you know? I think a lot of people feel that, and I think if you like listen to what people say about, you know, Ubisoft games, it's quite often that, you know, they have a strict formula that they're just following, and it's not fun, you know, because it's just the same game. And I haven't watched all of these, but I watched probably most of them, and I think the sad part is that a lot of them are like, here's how to fix open world or how to fix fast travel, and then it's more like they have an idea for how to like band-aid the situation rather than how to rework it, you know, from the, you know, from first principles, right? Which is what I'm trying to do in some sense. Whew. Okay, I'm gonna need a bit of water because this is it's a long one. Wow, the air in here is really bad. I'm gonna open for a while. And I just let the cat in. Okay. Cat. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's deep into this. Let's dive into this genre that I call open world immersive sim, and think about what that means, because I think there's a lot to talk about here. Some of this stuff I will have already mentioned, but you know, that's just how it goes. So let's talk about the open world part. So I have some subcategories here, and we're going to start with the open-endedness. And yeah, that's, you know, you can go where you want and you can choose your playstyle. You know, for me, one of the best open worlds that I've played is ummms, because there it really is the case that, you know, you can walk to maybe not every corner of the world, but almost every corner of the world from the start, and it really feels like, you know, you can just pick your goals, and you'll still, like, even if that's possible, you usually still follow like a reasonable path, right? Because you're like, oh, you get a quest to go to another village, or you find a bandit camp that's too hard, so you avoid that for now, right? You know, these sort of things. It should be simulated, so indirect and slow quest results. That basically means that, you know, you help out a village with something, and then, you know, a month later, that's when you can actually start to see the result. And I think a lot of times you won't actually be getting rewards for quests, or like I think a lot of time there won't even be a quest, right? It'll be someone in the village telling you, you know, someone has been killing my sheep, and then you're like, okay, they don't have to be like, please, you know, accept this quest to find out what it is and solve it for me. You can just be like, okay, I'll see you later, and then you can go out and you know, kill the wolf or whatever it is, and then you can come back and talk to another, you know, NPC, and they can be grateful, but they won't like give you anything, but they will still know that you were doing it, and, you know, when you go back to the first villager, they'll be like, oh, thanks, that was nice. I don't have any money because I'm just like a poor villager, you know, but now it means I can, you know, expand my collection of goats or whatever, right? So goal-driven locations and characters, yeah, and you get reputation as well, that's true. Goal-driven locations and characters, this is basically an AI thing where I want, you know, villages and down to characters to have like things that they want to some degree. It's a little bit weird to have village as a concept, but I think it probably makes sense from a gameplay perspective, right? Like a village wants to grow or expand down to the river where there's fish, right? We might just, like, optimally it would be better to have that on each character, but that could be just harder to do basically, so I think that's what we want. Things like seasons, weather, wildlife and beasts that move around the map, NPCs that actually, you know, feel like NPCs that aren't just there to like, they don't just stand and wait for you to approach them and give you a quest, right? They're actually people, and this is kind of what Skyrim has tried to do for a while, and Oblivion as well, and I think it's a great goal that we should try to, you know, we want to do that as well, and we want to try to make it better. Yeah. Massive, I think I've said this basically, you know, exactly how big we'll see. There will be technical constraints for sure, but I think these, we made some back of the envelope calculations and these aren't super unreasonable. So, yeah. Non-gated, yeah, so this is basically going back to that place where, you know, you're not like locked into an area at the start of the game, and then once you've like completed something, then you can move on to the next area or whatever. There might be, you know, a typical thing might be like the bridges in GTA, you know, they make sense, you know, from a particular point of view, and there might be like some cases where like, okay, you can't get to this other island because like until people have built sturdy enough boats to travel, you can't get there, and you can't get them to build these sturdy enough walls until you like help the elves so that they can craft their epic wood, you know, whatever, you know, but it's not like it's not a core thing, and I don't want this thing where the tutorial is like a 30-minute thing where you have to like do a fixed amount of steps every time you start playing the game to start playing the game. I think there are better ways to do that. Okay, so non-balanced is also very important, and it sounds a bit weird maybe, but it basically means that encounters aren't balanced towards your character as you face them, right? There could be like 5 kilometers from where you start the game, there could be like a troll village, and the trolls are super dangerous, you know, and you know, you just have to not go there, right, until you can handle them, right? And this means that for the most part we should make it so that you can predict or avoid or flee an encounter that is too hard. Like usually, like we should avoid trying to make things like, oh, you're walking to the forest and you're just ambushed by level 100 elves that shoot you and you can't do anything about it, right? I mean, if that happened, you would have to have made a mistake earlier where someone told you like, you probably shouldn't go there because people who go into the forest don't come back, you know, and if you go there anyway, you know, that's your own, you know, problem. But like if you don't do your research on where it's safe to go, then you're on your own. But that's fine. And as I mentioned earlier, like correctness over balance, where we put balance last in the order of priorities, and things like when you loot a place or a person, they have on them what they should have had on them in a world that makes sense, right? And then we figure out, okay, now that, you know, we have this thing, how do we balance that? Or another thing is like, if you take an arrow to the knee, right? The correct thing to happen generally is that you are severely injured in your knee and you know, in a, like, let's say it's like a typical villager, right? They would not be able to walk for, you know, any amount of like a year or something. I don't know. I've never had an arrow with me, but um, it'll take a long time to heal, and it'll affect your movement, all of that sort of thing. And this doesn't really happen in most games, and the reason is that it's quote unquote boring and it's maybe not balanced or whatever. Like a typical is that in a lot of like tabletop RPGs, it can be like impossible to kill someone in the first blow, because it's been balanced that way. It's really weird. So it's better to be like, okay, how do we deal with the player getting shot in the knee, and then, you know, being able to play on after that anyway, you know, which I think we can, if we just put our heads to it. Yeah, and systems to rules over tweaks is, so basically let's say that we have like a, you know, we get to a place where we have a really basic simulation of you know, beasts in the wilderness and villages, and they attacking each other, right? And then we might find that, well, it's too hard to for the villages to survive, and then the solution, like the proper solution to that, is not like, okay, then we need to tweak down the wolves' attack a little bit and tweak up the villagers' amount of spears or something. It's to think like, okay, probably what would happen is they would put up you know, walls. They would you know, we would have systems for generating walls in a reasonable way. They would maybe cooperate with their neighboring villages to have like guard patrols, you know, these sort of things. So that should be like, it's fine to tweak something so that it's, you know, roughly playable at least, right? But we should always be like, when we do that sort of tweak, we should always think that, okay, it's very possible that at some point we're going to add a new system that's going to totally destroy this, you know, balance or tweak, right? Yeah, that's what I mean. So in-depth fast travel, I've mentioned this before a bit, but I think there are a lot of things that we can do with fast travel to make it interesting. You can choose the speed you're traveling at. This can affect things like, you know, how likely you are to get ambushed, or how likely you are to spot an interesting place. You know, the route you'll take. Will you travel by road, or by nature, or by boat, right? How important is safety for you? What character skills do you have that could help you? Like, do you have good perception stats that will make you spot bandits earlier in an ambush? Means, I don't remember exactly what I thought there, but, you know, side tasks would be things like, oh yeah, means would be like, okay, do you have a horse? Do you have a carriage? Do you have, you know, what sort of things are you bringing with you that can help, basically? Side tasks is things like scouting, foraging, hunting, scouting, I don't know, things that put like a small tweak on your travels to make them more interesting. And then, of course, different characters would do different things, like, right? So if you have a lot of hunter skills, you would probably, and you have like a carriage with you, that would be great, because then you could hunt on your way, and then when you approach the village, you would be like, hey, I come bearing like 5 deer for you, right? That would be nice. Or if you're an herbalist, you could find a bunch of herbs. Are you traveling in darkness? Are you carrying lights if you do? Blah, 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 blah. All right. Procedurally generated, yeah. So avoiding level design feel is, it's just one of those things relating to making the game feel believable, where sometimes if you play a regular game, things will feel like, okay, this is just placed here because, not because it makes sense for it to be placed there, but because a level designer placed it there because then like it was good for gameplay or something, right? And I want to avoid that, because in a lot of cases with the immersive sim aspect, players should make the environment their own in some sense. Like if there isn't a barrel there, then you can pick up a barrel and put it there, right, if you need it. And one of the cool things about procedural generation is, of course, that if we have a rule for placing barrels in villages, and we can have that, and then at some point we're like, well, actually the way that barrels are placed isn't very nice, so we can just tweak that, and then that'll move all of the barrels in every village in the whole game, right? So with simple tweaks like that, we can make that sort of thing happen. Whereas if you were like a creative director on Skyrim or something, and you were like, actually in all of the 100 villages we now need to move, all of the level designers need to go around and move all of the barrels. That would it would just not happen, because it wouldn't be very good use of time, right? Discovering not puzzles is what I mean is just that when we procedurally generate things, we can place a lot of details, things like and this is something that you'll find in all types of RPGs, but you'll find like letters from people, or pictures of people in their house, that sort of thing. And because we will be able to do this at a much larger scale, it will allow the player to like go into a house and figure stuff out about a person, discover who they are, to maybe solve a specific problem, instead of having like 2 clues placed at specific locations that someone has handmade, right? Okay, immersive sim. What is this actually? And these are the things that I've thought of. I think you can probably think about it in many other ways, but I think this is a decent approach. So first person, I think, is important. It basically means that you're playing as you and not as this person here. I want things like leaning and prone. That feels like things you can do in immersive sims, where you can like move your body in various ways to really feel like you're stealth looking around the corner, right? I haven't decided about iron sights, but I think that that basically means like instead of having a crosshair on the screen, you have to we basically position the arrow on the bow so that you can see where it will hit when you let go, right? So it's more of like a diegetic thing, I think is the word, right? It's like an in-game way to aim. But I think we might want third person in very different cases, or in different parts of the game. Believable is something that I come back to many times, and it is really important to me that we build this world so that you're not taken out of it because you're just not you don't believe what's happening in the game, or you believe it just because you have this like, well, I just think this is how games work, so I believe it, and I don't want that, right? So you might say that this is like realistic, but people really don't like the word realistic. When I say realistic, I don't mean, well, it's exactly like Earth. what I mean is just it is the way it would have been given the premise, right? With magic and goblins and dragons and all sorts of things, right? Predictable. You can, yeah. I've talked about this. Things being where they are for, you know, their logical or historical reasons, and not for the gameplay or art reasons, right? That happens, you know, if you start to think about it, it happens a lot in games where you're like, this shouldn't really be like this, but it's clear that the level designer wanted, or quest designer or whatever, really needed this to be here, so that's why it's there, basically. And things behaving the way you'd expect, just so you can predict, you know, do planning and that sort of thing. And of course, sometimes sometimes there's a risk of us saying like, well, no, we shouldn't make it this way because it wouldn't be realistic, and it, like, people wouldn't build houses in this way or something. And I think that's a great starting point, but I think it's also, we should also be totally fine with saying, well, you know, it is a fantasy world. We could explain why they are building buildings this way, because we just make up a reason. Like in this part of the world, they, you know, put window. What are they called? Like the, you know, they do this thing in a weird way, and that's just their culture, right? So, you know, that's fine. To some degree, I think we can do that. And, you know, we're always going to need to compromise on some things, right? You know, like getting shot in the knee. We're not gonna simulate a perfect wound or like health system, but we might go like 80% there to have like a mix of believable but not frustrating, you know, that sort of thing. The final thing, overindulgent world building, is just something that bugs me a little bit when I watch a show or I play a game where they go over the top with the world building, and it feels like, you know, this isn't really how things would happen, but someone like, but you can like see the writer getting through to you, like they're like it's like they're sitting there and you can see they're coming up with these cool ideas and they just want to put that into the world, and you're like, yeah, but, you know, I get why you want to write it because it's cool in some sense, but also it doesn't really make sense. So in our case, we should try to not do that. So immersive sim is systemic, which means that there's a lot of systems and things operating on each other in weird ways. And we have agents or AIs, characters, that run around and do stuff, you know, on their own accord. And all of these types of things make funny things. Well, maybe not funny, but it makes things happen, right? And I have this squirrels and settlements, and what I mean here is just that it's to some degree it should be scalable to operate both on the level of like the creatures you see in the forest and all the way to like how big institutions in the game work, right? Tags and events is a pretty powerful way to think about or structure things, where, you know, a character can have like 20 tags on them, and when you maybe enter a village, maybe that could be like an or maybe like when a wolf pack enters the forest near the village, and that's an event that we trigger, and based on the tags of the different characters in the in the village that can cause various things to happen. Like if no one in the village has tag hunter, for example, then the wolves might grow super strong or something like that. Another thing that it can be used for is also things like this has the tag. I'm using an example from work, but like this has the tag ignitable, and if we pass an event that's like burn, then that's just going to get picked up by that tag, by that thing, and start burning, right? And prefer independent decision making. The idea here is that instead of having to the degree that we can, like instead of having sort of overarching managers that decide things, we should let the individuals in the game decide from their own point of view. So in Hammerting, for example, one thing that we did there, and it was in the end it was a compromise, but we started with we had these enemy lairs in the cave, and occasionally they would send like a raid towards the dwarven base, and this was managed by by an overarching manager that would like dole out like, now it's your turn to attack and now it's your turn to attack. But I changed it so that it was more towards the lairs themselves choosing when to attack, and that gave us that produced some quite useful effects. It's a little bit hard to describe, but it's good when it's possible. Understandable, I've mentioned this before. We need to make the game understandable, or there's like systems or the the rules and all that. What's happening, we need to make that clear to the player, what's going on and how things happened. And it can be as simple as you come back to a village and someone comes up to you and you're like, hey, thanks for getting rid of the wolf. Now I have built my goat farm, right? That's a pretty simple way to demonstrate that. Concrete, this means that objects should fully exist in the world and not just for the gameplay that they sort of enable. So I have this example of a ladder, and typically you can just a ladder is just there and you can climb it, but in this game I want you to be able to really do whatever you might want to do with it that you could reasonably want to do with a ladder, right? And the same thing with NPCs. So yeah, things should feel like actual things in the game, not just gameplay things. Freedom. Yeah, just allow the player to do what they want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be balanced. It's totally okay if someone figures out oh wow, like the example with the wizard in the tower from before. In a typical game, someone might see a QA do that thing where they fly up and then just kill the wizard without going past all of the guards and traps that they have prepared. And to me, doing that is totally fine, and we don't need to make it so that, well, if you do this, then we definitely need to make sure that there are guards always guarding the top, and in order to get down you need to pass other traps and you need to pick locks, and maybe some routes to solving tasks are just sometimes really easy, because that is sort of a reward in and of itself, where you can be like, oh well, I got this fly spell, look what cool thing I can do now, I've played one or a few RPG, like TTRPG campaigns, where it's felt like every encounter that I've had was like weirdly balanced, perfectly balanced for our team or for our like player group. It's like, how is it possible that wherever we go and whatever we do, when we face like battle, it's always like a really interesting balance for us to solve it. It's like at some point you're like, that doesn't make sense. There's someone behind the scenes, doing things, and yeah, I don't want that. Emergence, keep wackiness relatively low. Wackiness to some degree can be fun, where you like see funny gifs of people, like agents in the game doing stupid things, Goat Simulator style or whatever, and I think that is fun, but I also think that we're not making like a wacky simulator game, right? We're making something that's believable, and usually you shouldn't be brought out of the game for that. But sometimes, I think it's unavoidable that people will see just funny stuff going on, and that's okay. So combat as war is a thing, a concept that someone on some internet board came up with. It's more of a, it's not a new thing. It's more of like a description of a thing that already exists, but it's a good way to think about it. And the idea is basically that it's kind of what I mentioned, right? It's not about, okay, here are you, and here is your enemy that you just faced, and now it's combat and fight, right? It's more about, okay, you've spotted the enemy, but they haven't spotted you, and you have to be like, okay, can I take these out somehow? Because I won't be able to do it if I just fight them, right? I need to, roll a boulder at them first, or whatever it might be. Or I can drench the ground in oil so that I can turn it, like start burning it when they come at me, that sort of thing. That's something that I really want. So maybe you can like take out this troll village near your starting village if you just figure out how to do it, and that's okay. And this sort of danger is a seesaw thing. Is like, this is my nice illustration for that. It's like you have a plan, and there really is no danger. The danger is low, but at some point, if your plan goes wrong, right? Actually, this I realize now that the illustration is a little bit weird, but at some point, like, the danger will swing up quickly, and then you'll be like, oh shit, and you'll need to either handle it or you just need to flee, right? Okay, let's see if we have another slice of play. We do. Okay. The mayor of a village invites you to her birthday party. All her family and friends are there, and their spouses. These are real people who are now there and not being home or doing their usual thing in the village. The day before, you cast forecast. It's a spell. It'll be sunny. So you can tell the mayor or whatever. Right? So you could imagine like a thief player could be like, oh, all of these rich people are now here. I'm gonna go and steal things from their home while I can, right? Those types of things. And like magic in the game, I think same with the like flying spell from before. I think it's something that, it's like, again, a classless system. You should be able to like, okay, I'm a hunter, but there is this spell that would be really useful for me to know, so I'm gonna, there's nothing that's gonna stop you from picking at if you just put your skill points or whatever into magic, right? And I think with our systematic approach, there are interesting things that we can do. I just came up with this forecast spell, and you can imagine how it could be actually quite useful in many different circumstances to know what the weather would be like tomorrow, right? You're tracking someone, and if it's like gonna be super rainy, then it might be hard to follow their tracks because they might just be, mushy, too mushy, or it's going to be sunny and they're not going to leave any tracks at all because it's just too dry. Maybe, I don't know, I've never tracked someone. But you can see what I mean. We're almost at the end, I think. Okay, visual goals. And this is very much not my strong suit, but these are some thoughts I have on what I want the game to look like in various circumstances. So here are some nice pieces of art that I found, and I think especially like these three here are nice because of their use of, it feels like they have a sort of magical thing, like, I don't know, it feels, maybe it's just the volumetric fog that's doing it for me, I don't know, but I really like the colors and the feel of these. This is Ben Chandler, I think his name is, and this is more, I think, about the like, I really like the weather and the style of the castle. Okay, the environment should be realistic scale for the most part. So, like, if you have a mountain, it might be like, I don't know, 5 kilometers high or something. Or you might have a lake that's like really big, and you might not be able to, like, you'll need to think about, okay, I want to get to the village on the other side, but is it faster to cross it by boat, or like which way do I go around it? Because that actually matters, because they are big, right? I think I mentioned it earlier, but just quality wise, I'm sort of aiming for Skyrim. I think it's a reasonably good target for us. It's a high target, but it's also in some respects a low target. So I think, like, if some of the game looks better than Skyrim and other looks worse, I think that's okay. I think maybe the hardest part of matching Skyrim is just figuring out what it is about their art style that makes it so pleasant to walk around in, because it is. Yeah, volumetric fog and lighting is just, that's just really nice. Contextual just means that, if you go to, say, a village up in the mountains, it should look, or if you go to, I don't know, if you see trees in the mountain, they look different than trees, by the ocean, right? Instant zoom is something that I think we really need, and it's more of a technical aspect, but I think it's worth mentioning here. But I think, like, when you're because fast travel is so important to us, and camping and that type of thing, what I'm sort of envisioning is that when let's say that you set camp, then I think I want to zoom out and maybe rotate around like this, and it should be, or when you want to look at the map, you should be able to just zoom out of the map and see it from above, and there shouldn't be any loading things, or if you I don't know if this should be a spell or something, but at least from a dev point of view, it would be super useful to be I want to pan across the map and zoom into that village, and that should also be instant. Is a hard word, but it shouldn't be okay, now you need to sit at a loading screen for a minute or even 10 seconds. It's better if it's if it needs to load in or out, basically. But it should be. It's important to me that zooming or like moving across the map is fast. Also panning, because what I think I will want for fast travel is, and this is not set in stone, but I think what I want is like you zoom out, you still see the world map in a nice rendered way. You click on like a town, you blah blah blah, you said you go there, and then it zooms back and you the camera like starts following you in like a fast speed toward like actually, so your character will start to move and camp and move and camp towards getting to the place. So it won't be like an instant fast travel. It will need to like actually move you, because we'll need to do some sort of simulations on the way and so on. And I think when we do that, we might as well just move the camera very quickly, you know, following you through the landscape, basically. So vivid is also something I think a lot of games these days are a little bit. I'm I have a word, but I'm not going to say it. I think there is a lot of desaturation and mutedness of colors going on, and things like fog that makes, you know, landscape not, you know, you can't really see the landscape very well, and like it's to make it look, I don't know, it's to have, achieve a specific look, but I would like to have a more vivid look, a more colorful, saturated look. It doesn't have to be, it's not like, I don't want it to go totally the other way or anything, it's just, you know, this is nice. That's what I'm saying. Right. Characters, I want them to have roughly the correct proportions. They should feel like I mentioned this in the chat the other day, that I want them to feel like characters, and this goes to, you know, things like you know, goblins or, you know, moose people as well, that they feel real. They don't feel like something from like a fairy tale or something, right? You should feel like you're in a real world. We need to handle crowds. I think animation wise, we will need to avoid handmade animations, because first of all, we will have a lot of like eventually demands on what we want with our animations, like cat. And there's two problems with that. Either we have like really poor animations, and we are like, you know, they switch from like jumping to walking, or, you know, it'll look super basic. And I actually have high goals for animations in the game, and there's two problems with that. Is one is like just actually animating, like doing all of these animations is going to be really hard, and it's going to be even harder just based on the fact that we'll have, you know, a bunch of different races and so on. Another thing is like with a typical animation setup, you have these sort of animation state machines, and they are super complicated, and only like the ones that I've seen and like in projects that I've worked on are like incredibly complex, and only like a dedicated technical artist or technical animator can understand what they do, basically. And when you want to add like a new state, like okay, this character should now be able to jump when he's injured, or, you know, their entire moveset needs to work when they're injured as well. Then you have like, okay, now we need to like spend, you know, a week of someone just implementing that. And I think there are other ways to solve that that we need to look into. I'm not a fan of like exaggerated animations either, or like both animations and proportions, basically. You know, things like anime, you know, exaggerated stuff, you know, it's fine in anime, but I don't want it here. What you see is what you get is things like, you know, kind of what I mentioned before, but maybe taking it a step further, where if you kill someone, you get what they had on them, right? But you should also be able to see in a lot of cases what they are wearing on them or on your own character, right? So if you have a bow or and a knife and a backpack and 2 torches on you, then we should display that on your character as actual things that can drop when you die, and they can, you know, roll off and do things, right? Getting back to the concreteness of things. And no bow plate. I don't think that's going to get any arguments from anyone, but, you know, there's no like proper realistic armor and clothes and all that. Just looks better anyway, so there's no reason for like super sexist clothing. Okay, so settlements need to be distinct. You know, if a village, as I mentioned, in the mountains, should be different. And, you know, we've talked about this in the team, where you're like actually like in like a really cold area, you might have a really a different kind of heating system for the houses. Like you might have the chute, what's called, like the, you know, where you put in heat. That might be like in the center of the chimney. Sorry, thank you. Of a house, instead of like at the, you know, by the wall, you know, that sort of thing. Things that both make you feel like, oh, this actually feels like they've put some thought into it, and also things that you can maybe use for gameplay, right? And like your way to approach things will be different based on where you are in the world, because things will be a little bit differently built. Windows and vents is like a, you know, it's just a reference to like Deus Ex, where there are like multiple ways to enter and exit buildings. Distant lights is the thing that we had in Just Cause 2, where, you know, you could stand on a mountain and you could, like, if there was a house on the other side of the map, even if it was like 30 kilometers away, there would be like a tiny little blink of light that you would see on the screen. And if you looked at, like, there's like a city with a casinos and stuff, you could see that casino from like anywhere in the world, as long as you had like view distance to that. And that, like, really, it's hard to explain how much of a difference it made, but it really made you feel like it really added a lot of feeling to the world. And I think it would be super nice for us to be like, you've been hiking for days and you're like maybe lost or something. That would be cool. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna walk after a mountain and just try to get my bearings. And you get up to some plateau and you're like, I see a light, you know, that way, you know. Or I even see like a ring of light. It has to be a city walls. You can be like relieved, you know, that sort of thing. It's gonna be awesome, I think. Whew. Okay, do we have a final slice? I think this is the final one. Let's see. Okay, yes, right. You cast fireball in the midst of a town, trying to stop a burglar, but the fireball hits the thatched roof behind it. The orphanage burns down, killing everyone. And anytime you now attempt to speak to anyone, you can only choose dialogue options ranging from dark to mad. So this is, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I would really like for your character's dialogue options to match your character's experiences in the world and your like previous choices. So if you always pick the, let's say, threatening option in the game when you want to get your way, then you're gonna get more and more of those, and you're gonna get fewer and fewer attempts to like be kind to people, right? Yeah, killing children again, exactly. I mean, this example is, you know, maybe too strong, but I think, you know, maybe I get the point across. And this is also like something that you could probably do in most fantasy RPGs. You could just throw fireballs, you know, any which way, and you don't really have to care about it. But in a systemic game where, you know, fireballs burn things and people live in the things that are burned, you know, that, you know, it has ramifications, right? And if you don't think about it, you know, you're gonna start thinking about it when you play this game. All right, I think this is the final category. So another way to phrase this might be player promises, and I had that for a while, but personally I wasn't really sure what it meant, and I quite like this concept of having feelings that I want the player to feel when they are playing the game, because if they're not feeling anything while they're playing the game, then there's very little enjoyment, I think. And like, this is what makes totally different games can all be called fun, right? Because they are good at giving us the right feelings, you know, the feelings that they want to give us. If a game does that well, then that means that we are going to call it fun. Like a horror game, right? If you play a horror game and you get scared, that's you're gonna say that you had a lot of fun playing the game. Whereas if you play a Lego game or something with your kid, and your kid is like, I don't like that game because it scared me, then, you know, it's failed on delivering the types of feeling that it should have provided, right? So this is something that I definitely think we can work on, as in, you know, figure out which feelings we want, but these are the ones that I thought of. So first one is coziness. So basically a sense of feeling safe and where there's no risk, some warmth going on, and a feeling of just being able to sit and be like, this was nice, you know. Another one is pride. I think another word could be what was it that EA said? A sense of pride and accomplishment. Exactly, yeah. So I think that's also a very strong feeling, where, and these are actually, I think I had these two for Hammer Ting as well, when I thought about it. And it's basically like, as a player, you're like, oh, I had this plan and I nailed it, man. Or like, you start planning a stronghold and then you come back like a year later after you've hired a bunch of people, and you're like, you see your own stronghold. That's you know, I built this with you know, the money that I grew and with the people that I, you know, raised to be like my followers, you know. Or it can just be like, you know, I helped secure this forest, so now there's a new road here. That's super nice. Another one is awe, and that's anything from like just a scenic vista, like it looks nice, or maybe you sit on that plateau and you can see like a caravan rolling past. I think that's just evokes some sort of feeling of awe of the world. Wildlife doing their thing, like you could sit by the river and you see a bear coming and eating fish, but also things like more constructed things, right? Like beacons of the beacons of Gondor are super cool, right? And all of these are positive feelings, and that's not a mistake. I think like negative feelings also have their value, but I think if we're talking about the core 3 player feelings, I think having positive ones is a good one. Like if you were like the designer of Dark Souls, probably 2 of these 3 at least would be like negative feelings, right? And that's okay for that game, but not for this game. Here are the artists that I use. I hope I didn't miss anyone. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but they'll yeah, I think these are the ones, and I think all of these are really cool. And so this is the final slide, and this has always been a team project for me. I started about a bit over a year ago, and from the start I knew that, you know, I can't just make all of this on my own. I need a team, not only because I just need like manpower to do the things, right, but also because there are so many aspects of the game that it needs to be discussed in all manner of ways to make it good. And you know, I've been on teams where diversity hasn't been strong, and I've been on teams where they have been strong, and I massively prefer working in a diverse team. So, you know, I would like the team to grow, probably fairly slowly, because we need to, like, we're still quite early, and there's like, we can't like just take on 20 people because there wouldn't be like good things for them to do, right? But just 1 or 2 would be quite helpful, and I think would be totally okay for someone to be junior to join, as long as they, you know, were interested in learning and really thought that this was a cool project, which I hope I may have, you know, made you think. Or if you don't know, that's totally okay. This is not going to be a game for everyone, but you know, it is. What I'm primarily looking for right now is someone to help with spreading the word, as I call it, and that's things like posting on different kinds of social media. Like, I have a Reddit account since like 15 years, but I haven't posted anything about this game there because I just, you know, it's just too much for me to do. I produce a lot of, but you know, maybe a devlog video every month or something, and they are not at the quality I would like them to be. So, you know, some script writing or video editing skills would be super useful. You know, help keeping our Discord alive would be useful. I have the Open World Game Dev newsletter, so helping out with that as well. You know, all sorts of things there. I'm really like, it might be weird to do that, you know, to take in like a 5th or a 6th person as like a PR marketing person, but you might think. But for me, it's about, I want to try and take like a holistic approach to this game, and try to make it as though it was a real game, if that makes sense. I would also like someone to do programming, and there's a lot of programming to do, and already a lot to like dig into, I think. And it's anything from like world generation to you know, tweaking the bow to feel nice when you're shooting it, or you know, AI, or I mean, you can just imagine there's no shortage of things, right? And you know, we could also use like an art director and all sorts of things, but those two are the ones that I would personally like to get right now. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I do have my three teammates in the Discord chat, and also Kenny is here. So if any of you wanna put, like, I know you have been chatting and I haven't really been able to read what you're saying, but if you have something that you would like to ask or anything, feel free to request this stage and I will move you up so you can you can just ask it in the chat and I'll repeat it as well. That's fine if you don't want to talk on the video. Yeah, it's okay to not talk. I'm probably, can probably also hear me being a little bit tired. How long was this? 2.5 hours? Oh well, that's how it goes. 1.5, 2.5. Oh boy, it's a long video. Question: are you playing as a human or can you pick a race? Follow-up question: are humans the main character of the world, or are there other races while the other races are side characters? Good question. I did have at one point in the slides on the inhabitants part that said something like 50% are humans and 50% are meta-humans, which is basically like, other races, human-like races, but I don't know. I think we should definitely have humans. I think it will be really weird to make an RPG without humans. Sadly, I would kind of want it, but also I don't think it'll work very well. You need something to ground yourself in, I think. As I don't know that they need to be the majority, really. I don't think they are in Skyrim, for example. Well, they probably are, but I don't think they maybe need to be. Should probably vary a little bit on the biome and so on. But I think you should definitely be able to play as different races, because that's something that I enjoy myself. I always pick like a cat-like race so that I can jump and do rangery things. So I wouldn't call the other races side characters, really. Was there Kenny requested to speak? Hello.
Wow. Check this out.
Yeah, you're on the stage, Kenny. So Kenny is not on the team, but he's a friend and part of the Discord.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the cool vision doc. Let's imagine that your character dies.
Yep.
So I was just thinking about, like, you build, you have this this pre-baked world that you create for the player.
Yeah.
And basically, once you start a character, the world diverges from the author's intent, and it kind of runs. Well, let's say it's not set in stone after that.
Mm-hmm.
The player runs with it.
Yep.
Are you going to have like multiple characters in the same sort of, like, is the player allowed to make many characters in the same sort of instantiation of the world?
Yeah. That's a really good question, and I think yes. I think I would want it so that at least if you die, you can start a new character, but it will be like when your last character died off, right? So you can sort of continue in the same world. Because I didn't go into this, but the setting basically allows for like this change that you're trying to impart. It'll take like centuries. And so I think there's a lot of time really for, you know, multiple characters to build on each other's legacy, that sort of thing. I think that would be cool. It would also be cool, I think, if you can have like multiple characters at the same time, and be like, maybe they can't like meet and interact, but maybe they can sort of you know, hear rumors about the other character as you move around the map. I think that would be cool.
That's awesome. I saw the. I want to play a dynasty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So about the sort of overarching narrative that you didn't mention in the vision document.
Yeah.
It's like basically you have in summary, I believe it's something like you have a situation that starts off very difficult for the world, and then through the players' actions you sort of stitch together back the communities. And
Yeah, I can. I have a previous sort of slide for that here. I can drag that in, I think. So this is kind of the premise for the game. I'll just read it out. A millennia-long cycle afflicts the world, characterized by two main phases: chaos and prosperity, and two tides leading up to them: downfall and revival. Elements are at work to prolong and to shorten these two phases. The game starts at the passing of chaos. After 3 centuries of fear and reclusion, villages are secluded, civilization is fractured, the lands are forgotten, and the wilderness is claimed by monsters and raiders. Legends say that the tide of revival can linger for centuries. It is up to you to lead the charge of restoration. Yeah, that's the sort of premise.
does that entail that the gameplay is it's sort of the opposite of a traditional game? Like you start off and it's much more difficult to accomplish things because the world is in a much more dire situation.
I see what you mean. I think, yeah, not necessarily, as Alexander here is about to explain, but I can say it instead and take the credit. No, but like at the beginning, you'll probably be like, you know, fighting off wolves in the forest. But as I mentioned here, there are elements that work to prolong the phases. So you could imagine that there are sort of cultists or whatever that really, you know, that think that we should be in chaos or in downfall and so on, and they could start to get stronger as the world gets better, things like that. And yeah, like, yeah, you need to do bigger things as things go along, as Alexander says. So maybe you're helping out building, you know, setting up caravans at the start, but towards the end you're, you know, traveling through portals and meddling in politics and leading armies. Maybe that's too much, but you know, as I mentioned, you'll have your. If we do that, you could have your own faction, and it might be a lot of about like. It won't turn into like a management game, but it could definitely be like once in a while you have to, you know, you have a council or something, and you need to decide how to run certain things, and then just how, depending on your answers there, that's going to send out things into the world that are going to be simulated and do things, right? And of course, the stronger you are, it also means that you can go from like wolves to goblins to dragons, things like that, right? But yeah, you're right. It's a little bit on its head in some sense.
I'll ask one more question, then I'll step away to give other. I think just because it's a follow up to what you said. Based on the sort of ethos you described in the vision document about allowing the player to have freedom and choosing their own way, does that mean that the player can side with chaos and sort of destroy their previous accomplishments and be the bad guy?
I think yes. I think it's going to be like hard for the like just based on the simulation and all of that. It's definitely going to be possible for you to like go around and racing villages and being an all around bad person. But I think we won't like. It won't be what the game encourages you to do, both in terms of like content and I don't think it'll be as interesting, really. But it's definitely something that you'll be able to do it just from a Lul's point of view. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with me. I think the chat is saved automatically somehow, but yeah, I can definitely save it as a separate file or something. If we don't have any more questions, I think I'm done. So if you are one of these people who would like to join, if you search for me, you can just find me. Anyway, it's fine. Discord or email is probably the best ways, I think. Yeah. Oh, I got a clap from Giuseppe and hearts. Nice. It was long, but I, what can you do when you're describing the vision for a game like this? It's not like it's been really hard to be like, well, it's like these two games mashed together, and then you understand what the game is. It's not really like that, because I feel like it's different, enough that there's not too much to point to. Okay, well, I will go to bed, and hopefully this will be a recording. That will work, and if so, I will put it on the YouTubes at some point in the future. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that I didn't too much, because I'm really good at doing that. Okay, bye everyone. Have a good day or a good night. Bye.